What if I told you that you may have loved someone who was incapable of truly loving? Not someone explosive, not someone obviously cruel, but someone calm, controlled, seductive, someone who seemed too safe, too perfect. Psychopathy rarely presents itself as it does in the movies. It does not begin with violence. It starts with charm, with intensity, with that almost electric feeling of having found the right person. At first, everything seems extraordinary. The connection is fast, deep, almost supernatural. He understands you. He anticipated his pain. It says exactly what you needed to hear. But there is something strange, a subtle feeling that intimacy is too fast-paced, as if you were being studied, not loved. Psychopaths are experts in emotional reading. They observe micro-expressions, detect vulnerabilities, identify needs like a predator identifies prey isolated from the group, and they do it smiling. The average human brain creates bonds based on empathy, emotional mirroring, genuine exchange. The psychopathic brain, however, operates differently. It simulates connection, replicates feelings, imitates responses, not because you feel it, but because you learned what it looks like to feel. Maybe you remember that stare, almost hypnotic intensity, from security unshakable. There was no doubt. There was no insecurity. There was no fear of losing you, and that felt like strength. But maybe it was absence, the absence of real attachment, the absence of guilt, the absence of deep empathy. Relationships with psychopaths don't start out in chaos. They begin in ecstasy. They build a narrative where you feel chosen, special, single, until slowly something changes. The heat turns to coldness. Presence becomes distance. Certainty becomes confusion, and you start to wonder what you did wrong. But maybe the right question was never about you. If you've ever felt like someone seemed too normal, maybe this video will help you understand why. Why? Because the most disturbing part of psychopathy isn't the violence. It is the ability to love without feeling, of promising without connecting, to look into your eyes and see nothing. What if the love of your life never had a heart capable of loving? The biggest mistake we make when imagining a psychopath is thinking of someone out of control, violent, unstable. Most are not like that. They are functional, elegant, socially skilled, often admired. The clinical term most associated with psychopathy is antisocial personality disorder, with specific traits of emotional coldness, manipulation, and lack of remorse. But outside of, and that is exactly where the danger lies. The psychopath does not conquer through fear, conquer by fascination. He comes into your life like someone resolved, secure, intense. He observes your tastes, your traumas, your stories poorly resolved. And then it starts to shape up. It's no coincidence that he loves the same songs, who shares the same pains, who has gone through experiences incredibly similar to yours. That's not connection. It's strategic mirroring. Psychopaths have an ability called emotional mimicry. They study human expressions as a scientist studies an experiment. They know when to smile, when it touches your hand, when to keep silent, and they do it with surgical precision. While you feel butterflies in your stomach, he feels control. As long as you delivers, it collects data. Each insecurity revealed becomes a future tool of manipulation. But at first, nothing seems wrong. On the contrary, you feel seen like never before, listened deeply, validated. It is an almost intoxicating experience. The problem is that this intensity is not born of true empathy. She is born from need to dominate the narrative. Unlike an ordinary person who builds intimacy little by little, the psychopath accelerates. He talks about the future in the first few weeks, uses two big words too soon. Destination, soulmate, forever. This acceleration creates emotional dependence. You begin to organize your life around of that presence. And then something subtle appears. Small tests, small contradictions, little lies that seem irrelevant. When you question, he smiles, says you're exaggerating, That is sensitive too much, that he would never do anything to hurt you. And you believe, because he's still charming, he's still thoughtful. It's still perfect for the most part time. This is what makes the mask so powerful. It doesn't fall all at once. It wavers. Moments of coldness are interspersed with intense displays of affection. Distance is followed by rapturous closeness. This pattern creates cognitive confusion. Your brain starts working to regain an idealized version of him. You think, he's not like that. He must be going through something, but maybe he's just like that. Psychopaths don't love like we do. They invest, evaluate return, measure usefulness. The relationship is not a bond. It's a position game. And while you try to understand what has changed, he's already a few moves ahead. The question is, did you fall in love with a real person or with a perfectly formed mask, built to capture you? After the enchantment mask is firmly installed, the most important phase begins. Silent and more dangerous. The manipulation. Not that obvious manipulation, but the psychological one. Progressive. Calculated. The psychopath understands a fundamental truth about the human brain. We are driven by emotional reward, affection, validation, attention. When we receive this, our dopaminergic system is activated. We create a bond, dependence, attachment, and he uses it like an engineer uses tools. In the beginning, there is abundance, constant messages, intense praise, physical contact frequent. You feel wanted, absolute priority. This creates a chemical spike, an association between that person and emotional pleasure. Then, suddenly, something changes. Messages slow down, attention cools, enthusiasm disappears. You feel anxiety. What happened? Was it something I said? Did I do something wrong? This is where intermittent reinforcement comes in. In behavioral psychology, it is known that unpredictable rewards generate greater fixation than constant rewards. It's the same mechanism behind gaming addiction unlucky. You never know when the next moment of affection will come. And precisely for that reason, keep trying. When it becomes intense again, you feel relief. Almost euphoria. And this strengthens the cycle. Another common tool is gaslighting, small distortions of reality, small narrative inversions. You remember something he said. He denies it. You notice a change in behavior. He says everything is the same. You express discomfort. It suggests that you are too insecure. Over time, your confidence in your own perception begins to deteriorate. You start apologizing for things you didn't do, doubting clear memories, reviewing every word before speaking. If something here starts to make sense to you, stick with it until the end. What's next? It can change the way you observe people, because manipulation does not end in confusion. It evolves into control. The psychopath isolates without appearing to be isolating. He criticizes his friends for worrying with you. He questions his family for not understanding your relationship. Plant seeds of distrust. And you, wanting to prove loyalty, begin to move away from others. The more isolated you are, the more dependent you become. There is also the inversion of blame. When he makes a mistake, you feel guilty. When he lies, you apologize for being suspicious. When he hurts, you wonder why he's too sensitive. This is no accident. Psychopaths have a high capacity for emotional reading, but low effective empathy. They understand what you feel. They just don't feel together. This difference is crucial. An ordinary person, seeing his partner crying, experiences emotional discomfort. Psychopath experiments with information, data, weak points. He learns exactly where to press to provoke a reaction, where to praise to restore dependence, where to silently threaten to maintain control. The relationship becomes a behavioral laboratory, and you become the experiment. The most disturbing thing is that, on the outside, nothing seems abusive. There is no constant screaming. There is no explicit violence. There is confusion, emotional instability, an invisible roller coaster. You start to live in a state of alert, trying to predict mood, trying to avoid conflicts, trying to recover its initial version. But that version was never real. It was the bait. As you fight to save the relationship, he assesses whether there is anything left to extract. Admiration, support, resources, status. Because deep down, the relationship is not about love. It's about usefulness. And when usefulness starts to diminish, you stop being a partner, and it becomes disposable. There is a specific moment when the illusion begins to crack. It's not an explosion. It's silent. A blank stare after an argument. An absence of reaction to your pain. A coldness that doesn't suit someone who claims to love you. It is at this point that neuroscience begins to explain what the heart still tries to deny. Brain imaging studies show that individuals with psychopathic traits present lower activation in the amygdala and ventromedial prefrontal cortex, areas directly linked to empathy, guilt, and deep emotional processing. That doesn't mean they don't understand emotions. It means they don't feel them the same way. When you suffer, the common brain activates mirroring circuits. There is discomfort, genuine, an internal need to alleviate the other's pain. In the psychopathic brain, there is cognitive recognition, but there is no effective resonance. He knows you're crying. He is that you should care. He may even feign concern. But internally, it is silence. This absence creates something disturbing, decisions without emotional weight. An average person hesitates before lying to someone they love, feel guilty before betray, suffers when hurt. The psychopath calculates. It evaluates risk and benefit. It measures external consequences. But it does not carry internal conflict. And maybe you notice this. After an intense fight, while you were emotionally destroyed, he had felt too stable. No true remorse. Without that urgency to repair. There were right words, but there was no corresponding emotion. Psychopathy is often described as a combination of superficial charm, manipulation, and deep emotional coldness. It is the absence of moral anxiety. This explains why they can alternate between affection and indifference so easily. Their attachment is not emotional, it's functional. You represent validation, company, status, emotional resources, but it does not represent effective fusion. And this becomes evident when you fail to meet his expectations. Change is fast, almost clinical. That intense look that used to look like passion now looks like assessment. You start to feel like you are being watched, judged, measured, because it is. Without deep empathy, there is no real bond. Without real bonding, there is no fear of losing. And without fear of losing, there is no love as we know it. The most disconcerting thing is that, outwardly, he may keep saying he loves you. But love, in the typical human brain, involves oxytocin, attachment, emotional activation, reciprocal. In the psychopathic brain, love is strategic language, a maintenance tool, and when you finally confront that coldness, it can reverse, saying you're dramatic, which is exaggerating, that no one has ever accused him of this before. But deep down, you already noticed. There's something missing, something essential, something human. And the question begins to echo inside you. How can you be with someone and still feel completely alone? Disposal does not begin with a termination. It starts with a change in temperature. The intensity decreases. Answers become shorter. Plans for the future evaporate without explanation. You feel like something is slipping through your fingers, but you can't exactly name it what is. This is the beginning of the final phase of the cycle. Idealization, devaluation, and discard. In the beginning, you were elevated to a pedestal. It was different from everyone else, special, irreplaceable. Then came subtle criticism, ambiguous comments, small comparisons. The glow was slowly being erased. Now you feel like you need to prove yourself. And that's exactly the point. When the psychopath realizes he got what he needed, admiration, support, validation, emotional stability, the dynamics change. There is no longer any need for investment. Without true emotional attachment, there is no internal grief. There is only calculation. It may disappear abruptly, or remain physically present but emotionally absent. Silence becomes a weapon. Messages ignored, unreturned calls, superficial conversations. You try restore the connection. He responds nonchalantly. This sudden coldness activates the same circuit in your brain as physical pain. Studies show that social rejection and bodily pain share similar neural areas. You're not exaggerating. It really hurts. But for him, the end is a logistical transition. If confronted, it can reverse again. Say you've changed, which is suffocating, which has always been too complicated. It's never his responsibility. This process creates a deep psychological wound called bonding trauma. How much? The more unstable the relationship, the more difficult it is to let go. Because your brain is still looking for the idealized version of the beginning. You remember the first look, of promises, almost magical intensity, and try to understand how someone can change so much. But maybe he never changed. Maybe he just stopped acting. The dismissal is cold because there is no empathy to cushion the impact. There is no honest conversation. There is no true emotional closure. There is substitution. Often he is already invested in someone else before he even walks away completely from you. This isn't about new love. It's about new source of emotional supply. You start to question your own worth, your ability to perceive signals, your sanity. And that's the cruelest part. The psychopath doesn't just go away. It leaves doubt. It leaves you revisiting memories, trying to figure out where you went wrong. But the mistake was not loving too much. It was believing that I was being loved in the same way. The silence after the disposal is deafening. Not because there are no answers, but because the answers are difficult to accept. You didn't lose someone who loved you. You lost someone who was using you. And the question that remains is the most disturbing. If everything seems so real, how could something that was never love hurt so much? Perhaps the scariest thing is not the fact that psychopaths exist, but the fact that they go unnoticed. They work, they smile, they seduce, they build families, they frequent the same places than you. They look into your eyes without you noticing the absence behind them. Psychopathy is not marked by horns or visible signs. It is marked by a gap invisible, the inability to feel deep empathy. And that forces us to face something uncomfortable. Love, as we believe we know it, depends on emotional reciprocity, from shared vulnerability, of fear of losing. But when one party doesn't feel that way, what's left? Performance remains. There remains a strategy. Control remains. Maybe you were never loved by that person. Maybe it was analyzed, rated, used. And this realization hurts because it confronts something even greater. Our own need for belief in what we want to feel. We want to believe in intensity, in the promise, in the romantic narrative. We ignore subtle signs because the alternative is too scary. Recognizing that someone can simulate love perfectly forces us to accept that neither every connection is genuine, and that not every "I love you" carries emotion. If this content made you think differently about the human mind, sign up. Here we explore what almost no one wants to see. Because in the end, perhaps the greatest danger is not loving a psychopath. Maybe it's never realizing he was by your side. And continue to believe that it was love.